Hey guys, Dave with First Place Auto Parts. Thanks for joining me in the studio today. You know, when you're working on a classic American muscle car or truck, or even a motorcycle or a tractor, doesn't matter what it is, at times you have to recondition a part and not only replace bearings and seals, but sometimes we have to do something cosmetically. And in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the differences between just what they call wet paint or paint and powder coating the product. There's got a lot of options when it comes time to either making the color really nice or changing the color altogether, or maybe you just want to protect that part from rusting, like this caliper I have here that already is starting to show some rust on a bare cast iron part. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at where the benefits and features are of each, and maybe talk about some of the places where it makes sense to powder coat stuff and where it makes sense to paint them with the old traditional rattle can or even a spray gun. So guys, in today's video, we're talking powder coating versus wet paint. Which one's right for you and your application? So stay tuned. Now, when I was younger and just getting started in restoring cars, we really didn't have a lot of options. It was go to your local hardware store, car parts store, and pick up your favorite can, a rattle can of spray paint. We cleaned it and we primed it and we painted it, and we were pretty much stuck with that finish. Now we have what's called powder coating, and powder coating is some really interesting stuff. Most of you guys know it's in a powder that has an electrical charge that's attached to the part, and what's neat about it is it's actually dusted on the part, and then it's baked in an oven to actually cure the actual powder itself. The powder has a tendency to melt and flow into spaces that paint may or may not be able to flow into or actually cover very well. So there's definitely some advantages and disadvantages to both powder coating and paint. And today we're going to talk about those things. And the first thing we want to start off with is the powder coat advantages. And the first one is that when applied correctly and the part is cleaned correctly, and typically it's blasted beforehand and degreased, is that it is a very durable finish. It's a thick, durable finish. It's robust and it has a great shine. The other nice thing about powder coating is that it flows well. Look, the gloss on this thing is second to none. So when you spray paint something like this, especially super porous parts like aluminum or cast iron, what you're going to see with spray paint, or what they call wet paint in the industry, is you're going to see all the creases and crevices with paint unless you put it on very thick and put on multiple coats. The nice thing about powder coating is it's one coat and it flows very evenly because, again, it's electrically charged, both positive and negative, so it's drawn to the part itself. But when it cures into a very lustrous finish that's very thick and very durable. Now, another thing to powder coating that has a benefit over the wet paint is that it tends to be a little more resistant to fade. Now, this isn't exactly something that you'd want to put on top of your car because getting the colors to match up might be a little different. But when it comes to things like suspension components and braking components, like the brake calipers that I have here, it lives well in a high heat environment. Now look, it's not for applications necessarily where exhaust systems are included, but when you get up to temperatures to 200 to 300 degrees, your powder coating, like it might reach on a brake caliper, is durable enough. Now, when it comes to the disadvantages of powder coating, and there's a couple of those as well, the first thing is going to be cost, because quite honestly, it's not as simple as just going and buying a can of $4 or $5 paint and hosing this thing down. You're going to have to take the thing off and take it to somebody who specializes typically in powder coating, and you're going to leave it with them for a little bit. And the cost, well, it can be 2, 3, 5 times as much depending on how intricate the part is. The other thing is, something like this caliper here, you're going to have to take the pistons out of this thing, because this thing would be cured. When you take it to a powder coater, the rubber seals would actually melt or be deformed in the oven that they put them in. So to bake this thing, it's a pretty high temperature to make powder coating work, so you may have to take something like this caliper apart before you take it to your favorite powder coater, or he'll charge you extra to do it. So the first thing is not only cost, but also the disassembly process. Something like control arms, for example, upper and lower control arms where they have the rubber bushings. Look, you're not going to have that part powder coated after you put those bushings in. You're going to want to do it beforehand. So powder coating itself, not only is it more expensive, a little more time consuming, but it uses a lot of heat to cure. That's part of the curing process. So not all parts, especially when they're fully assembled, is something necessarily, especially anything that has rubber parts in it, is something you're going to want to send to the powder coater. And the final drawback, if you will, to powder coating is it's fairly thick. Remember I said it only takes one coat, and that's cool, but the other thing is it's thick. So if you're going to put this thing somewhere where it has tolerances, tight tolerances, you're not going to want to powder coat it. Now you can remedy that with taping things off. Anytime you take a part to a powder coater, you're going to want to make sure that you protect the threads, and you're also going to want to, anywhere it's machined or where it's going to bolt up to something and have a tight fit, you're going to want to make sure you mask those areas off, because you do not want that to be powder coated, because it may interfere with the reassembly of that part. Take the caliper, for example. You don't want any of this stuff getting into the actual piston bore where that caliper piston rides in, because you'll never get that thing in, nor will it ever seal properly. So you've got to take some care when you're actually, or your powder coater has to take some care, but depending on the type of parts you're going to take, it's really going to dictate how complete they are. If you've got, like say, for example, the control arm bushings that have the rubber bushings installed and also the ball joints and the boots, look, not a good candidate. But if you're rebuilding that control arm and you're removing that ball joint and those bushings, it's a perfect time to take it. Just know that you have to do a little prep, or your powder coater's gonna have to do a little prep to mask those areas off when you're gonna wanna put some tight clearance parts in. Because with powder coating, it's thick enough, it could interfere with that process. Now when it comes to traditional, what we call wet painting or spray painting, whether you're using a gun or something like this aerosol can, I can tell you from experience that it definitely pays to pay a little bit more for a better product like this SEM can. Look, these guys nail the finish, but also the tip on this thing and the propulsion is perfect to get a nice even mist. But this stuff has worked well for a long time, and it has a lot of advantages over powder coating, such as the cost. Look, you can get one of these cans anywhere from $5 to $8, and you can spray a lot of parts with one of these large cans. There's a lot of specialty paints, such as this one for engine or high temperatures. There's ones for brake calipers. There's one for headers, and there's all sorts of colors. And perhaps that's one of the biggest benefits of these spray cans is the colors. Technology has come a long way, but these wet paints have a lot of advantages over powder coating, such as ease of use. Like, you can do this in your backyard. Also, this stuff goes on pretty thin, so you remember those areas, those machined areas I was talking about, are those areas where it's a very tight fit. Look, you don't necessarily want the thickness of powder coating. Wet painting makes a lot of sense. Also, this stuff is somewhat durable, especially some of your more advanced, like your ceramic paints and things of that nature. It's very robust and can be used in a lot of different areas. It can be used in areas where the part doesn't have to be heated, and that's a big thing. The other thing that the advantage of spray cans have is you can touch them up over time. Look, it can be a plus or a minus, because a lot of times you're going to get rock chips. Something that may chip spray paint may not chip powder coat, but if it does chip your powder coat, it's going to be a lot harder to touch up. With a wet spray paint or a spray can, it's as simple as taking it up, masking the area off, and respraying it. So what wet paint has going for it is not only cost, but ease of use, and you can touch it up. Now, some of the disadvantages are this stuff really isn't that durable. If your stone hits it, it's going to chip. If you hit it with a wrench, it's going to chip. So the chances are very good that at some point in time you're going to have to do some touch up with wet paint. The other thing is, it takes multiple coats to get a nice smooth finish, especially depending on the product you're painting. Like I said earlier, aluminum and cast iron, to get this cast iron, this raw cast iron piece, as smooth as this powder coated piece, you're going to have to probably sand all the raised ridge areas. You're going to have to prime it and possibly wet sand that thing, and then do your couple of applications of your wet paint to get that slick of a finish. Look, if that's important to you, powder coating is definitely the easier way to go. Places where powder coating works well are things like brackets and unassembled parts, especially when it comes to your suspension, because it is very durable. Spray paint still reigns supreme though on things like engine blocks and anything that needs to be touched up or is already assembled and you don't want to take it apart. Look, it can cost a lot of money just not only in the powder coating, but rebuilding those parts if it doesn't need to be done. If it needs to be done, well, it makes a lot of sense to use powder coat in a lot of those areas. But if you've got areas that have, say, a motorcycle frame that has a lot of areas that you're going to bolt things on, there's going to be a lot of prep that has to go into doing powder coat than it would with a spray can. Look, you can spray a frame that has bolt holes and things of that threaded areas with no problem, where you couldn't even think of doing that with powder coating. So each one of these products has its place. Powder coating, more expensive, more durable, really has a nice finish, but it's going to be more expensive, and it's going to be a little bit more limited in regards to things where you have tight fits. Or the preparation it takes, where these traditional spray cans, like these things will probably be around forever. I love them. I've got a shelf full, probably like you guys do of these things. Super easy to use, not quite as durable, doesn't look as slick and shiny as powder coating does, but it has its place as well. So either way you go, the right application is going to mean everything to which product you use. It doesn't matter which product you choose, but when it comes time to restoring or repairing your American muscle car or truck, please check us out at First Place Auto Parts. It's always open, super easy to use, and we have the best parts available. We scour the planet for only the finest restoration performance parts for your project. It's easy to find. Simply go to First Place Auto Parts at fpautoparts.com. There you'll find everything you need for your project. Until next time, keep the hammer down and keep it between the guardrails.